And welcome into another episode of Tiger Territory, part of the Foul Territory Podcast Network, a Detroit Tigers podcast. I am Kieran Steckley. With me, as always, the man who is always down to do the time warp again. He is Cody Stavenhagen. How you doing?
Hey, doing good, Kieran. Baseball season's about to be over. If not tonight as we're recording this, then here in another day or two for sure, which is kind of a strange feeling, but it also means that we're going to have some more tangible things to talk about because once your team's out of the playoffs, as you guys know, it can feel like such a dead month, topic-wise.
It can, trust me, as we try to come up
But
with
there's not going to be a dead episode. We're coming with some
No.
good stuff today. That wasn't me telling you guys to turn this off. Sorry.
Honestly, this is an episode that it's kind of a sugar rush episode, to be honest. Like we're gonna have a lot of energy here today. As Cody said, we're recording this before Game 5 of the Yankees-Dodgers series. I do just have one quick little thing to say about what transpired yesterday. Look, man, Ohtani is in a sling running out for pregame introductions. Okay. He is not going to be able to swing the bat at the level that we understand Ohtani to do it, right? I think we can all understand that. We could have anticipated that going in. Actually, this was before Game 3. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Game 3. Then why is Schmidt like walking, basically unintentionally, intentionally walking Shohei Ohtani to set up the Freddie Freeman home run in Game 3 that took the air out of the building, the first Bronx World Series game in 15 years or whatever. I was like, why don't you go after Ohtani, a guy who you know cannot adequately swing a bat? I don't know. Sorry. That just kind of irked me at the time, and I'm still like reliving it a little bit. Other than that, for a 4 and about to be 5-game World Series, potentially more, pretty entertaining, even though we were looking at a sweep. You have the Freddie Freeman stuff. You have fan interference stuff that this time doesn't go the Yankees' way. You have the local kid, Volpe. I mean, the Judge saga still looms. Stanton getting thrown out at home. A little Alex Cora taste for the Yankee fans. Should they ever be in their employ? That play was way closer than I thought would be happening, just FYI. But anyway, so a lot of stuff happening for what has been technically a lopsided series, and we get to see Jack Flaherty again tonight, Cody. So any World Series thoughts to top off here?
Just a couple little things to go off your like walking Ohtani point. I mean, Clark Schmidt got behind a 10 of the 15 batters he faced, so I was just hearing like AJ Hinch and Chris Fetter in my head the whole game. Like the value of first pitch strikes, which I think is still one of the great unsolved mysteries. Like I've said multiple times, every pitching coach in the history of baseball has been like, got to get ahead. For some reason, the Tigers have become really good at it and are helping guys who haven't always been good at it improve at the simplest thing, like throwing the ball over the plate in an 0-0 count. And so to the point now where I'm watching other guys not do it, it's like, come on, what are you doing? The Tigers pitchers are always ahead. Don't know how, don't know why, but they are. And the other point with the fan interference stuff, 2 weird instances of that in this series, but I'm sick of it being compared to Jeffrey Mayer. Like I get it because it's the Yankees, but like neither of these instances have altered the outcome of the play. There's been no, like, the game has not changed because of them. So it's really, like, not that relevant of a comparison.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just, like I said, it lends itself. I mean, we haven't seen another Barkman type situation at Wrigley Field. I can only imagine what a Twitter reaction would be should that happen.
I had a good thought. My colleague Andy McCullough said this today. If the Bartman thing happened now, the guy would have his own like multi-million-dollar podcast within a week.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're expecting these guys to be sponsored by DraftKings here in the next like 4 to 8 hours.
Going into exile, Bartman would be like a media star, and he'd be very wealthy.
I hope he's doing all right wherever he is, because in all seriousness, it's a shame this guy had to go into exile for something like that, and these dudes are being celebrated as heroes. But anyway, that's a soap opera.
They're not heroes. They're idiots. All right, we'll move on. We can talk some Tigers.
But also still with the World Series connection. As I said, Jack Flaherty's on the mound. By the time you guys are listening to this, you will know the result of his outing in Game 5. But somewhat randomly, Cody, it's funny. I joked a couple weeks ago, like, yeah, we ever gonna really know the return for Flaherty? And well, we now we know, at least reported, one of the potential pieces that had the Yankees pulled the trigger on a Flaherty deal. It seems that one of the names involved is according to John Heyman over at the New York Post would have been right-handed pitcher Will Warren. So obviously, if you don't follow the Yankees, you probably don't know that much about Will Warren, but he is on the back half of his 20s. He was an 8th-round pick in 2021 with the Southeastern Louisiana. Ironically enough, he actually did become a major leaguer post-trade deadline with the Yankees. The results, not great, Bob. He pitched 22.2 innings and had a 10.32 ERA. And that's with 5 starts and 6 appearances. So, however you want to define that sample size, it was a sample size. And when I saw that report, the first thing I wanted to do, and it's hard to do, but the first thing I wanted to do was kind of go back to my mindset at trade deadline time. And what I thought about the return from the Dodgers with Tyron and Sweeney. And I was like, what I say at the time? I was like, you got 2 hitters, it feels pretty adequate, like the profile of Tyron. And then, Sweeney seems like a guy who might be able to help you out. That's what we thought at the time. Funny how things work out. I would imagine, without doing any deep dives on Will Warren or anything, I probably would have kind of been like, okay, and at the time, someone who had never made it to the major leagues and was, born in the year 1999, and I just don't know if I would have been all that impressed. Now there would have surely been other pieces, but we can only talk about what we know for sure. I'm not sure I would have had the same kind of okay feeling that I did with Lorenzo and Sweeney. So you obviously are well connected. You hear names all the time. What was your reaction to Heyman putting this out there and then just kind of hashing out the what if of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talked about this a couple weeks ago, I was like, yeah, we'll probably never know because generally people don't just leak that stuff, or at least, but I also said, yeah, I'd heard a name. I wasn't going to report it because I never had it 1,000% pinned down, but the name I had heard was none other than Will Warren. So especially if Heyman's putting it out there, I believe this to be true that Warren was the headliner of that deal. I don't know the rest of the package, never heard other names. So a little bit hard to judge if you don't know the whole trade, but yeah, you see it on paper and it doesn't really wow you. Warren, I'm sure he's a good pitching prospect. If the Tigers like a pitcher, there's got to be something to him. But he's a little bit older, 5.91 ERA in AAA. I guess we also know that AAA ERAs don't matter based on the second half of Detroit's season. But yeah, I'm not wowed or floored or saying, oh, you wish the Tigers had that guy. Based on what Lorenzo's doing right now, it almost looks like maybe the Dodgers return is going to end up being better.
Lorenzo, some nice. We've seen all the hitting highlights, but we, saw some backstop stuff too that looked. He looked spry back there.
Yeah.
For a big guy, he's kind of assumed, but yeah, you look pretty spry. So we'll see on that. But yeah, I mean, I guess the way I would try to, again, think back to my mind back then is that, did you get somebody of high upside? That's one of the things that we talked about. Did you get somebody with some upside? And obviously, Lorenzo then was apparent, and we know even more about that now. I would have been struggling to use the U word there in regards to Will Warren. And like I said, maybe there's somebody else in there too. Maybe they were thinking, here's a guy who, instead of Sweeney, who could potentially help this year on the field, they're thinking, here's a guy who could help our pitching staff this season or whatever, given that they're trading starting pitcher and the injuries were already obviously mounting at that time. So, there's a lot that goes into it. I think everybody is going to end up happier with this deal. And then, look, if Flaherty closes out, Dodgers are going to have no regrets either, right? So they probably don't already because, we helped them get to a World Series as well.
No, there's one party that should maybe regret this, and it's the Yankees.
Which begs the question. I'm curious why this was put out there. as I say all the time, things get
Mm-hmm.
put out there for a reason, but I kind of struggle to figure out what the angle is on that. But regardless, I think I'm a big information guy, so we got some more information about that kind of hectic day. So I appreciate John for putting that out there and his source for trusting John to do that. So kudos to everybody all around. Uh, some other Tigers news. We had like an announcement, another front office addition, and that would be Shane Farrell, who comes from the Toronto Blue Jays. He was the director. He was the scouting director there, and he will now be the director of player development for the Tigers. Significant in the sense that he also comes from Cubs lineage. So Harris is familiar with him. Greenberg's familiar with him. And so yeah, I got a little couple Theos in the Tigers front office right now. So I'm sure Theo's real proud about that. And another connection, Cody, we joke about this all the time, from the state of Oklahoma to the Tigers, because Farrell's dad, John, was played for the Oklahoma State Cowboys in the 80s, part of some really legendary teams under Gary Ward. So so the connection runs even deeper. You know, don't have really a lot of analysis on this one, but it seems like Harris keeps finding like-minded people, like experienced people to come into the front office. And I mean that in a good way. I don't mean that in a groupthink sense. So
Yeah, overall, like I've never met Shane Farrell, but I know a lot of people who know him, and I've only heard good things about him. Seems to be a really sharp, likable guy. Has obviously worked, in several different organizations, so he has a range of experience. He was pretty high up in the Blue Jays system. Coming here to work under Ryan Garco, seems like a positive addition to me. The groupthink thing is interesting when you already hired Jeff Greenberg off the Cubs tree. Now you're hiring someone else off that tree. Maybe something that generally just concerns me a little, but overall, I mean, I think the Tigers front office has become really strong over the past couple of years, and I'll be interested to hopefully get to know Shane Farrell a little bit more.
yeah, maybe we can get him on the pod. We'll see.
Hey, Shane, welcome anytime.
Make him a friend of the podcast. So also you can go find his player profile page when he pitched at Marshall. I believe it was pitcher. And he was a business management major at Marshall. So there you go. Well, there's your background.
Don't get that information everywhere now.
Yeah, there's your background, the latest addition to the front office. But, this is going to be, as we've talked about a million times, is going to be a interesting, impactful, and kind of tone-setting offseason that the front office dictates, going into the 2025 season. And it's no secret that, speaking of pitchers, he is a pitcher, right? The Tigers are going to have to add to the pitching staff. So I know you texted me, you said like, hey, I got a name that I kind of want to talk about or whatever. I don't even know who it is. So I'll just kind of leave the floor to you. Is there somebody that kind of, you had the Yandy Diaz thing from the hitting side, last week. So now on the pitching side, you got a name that kind of makes sense for the Tigers.
Yeah, for sure. I have talked about, I'm going to try to approach this offseason thinking a little bit less like, what would I do? Or what should the Tigers do? And more like, what will the Tigers do? Given what we know about this front office and about this coaching staff, who are they actually going to target? What are the things they are looking for? And you look at the list of free agent pitchers, it's pretty easy to throw out Walker Buehler, Luis Severino, guys like that. But I think I've landed on a name, and I can't take full credit. I had some help in a conversation with this, but a name that I believe the Tigers might just like a ton, none other than Nick Pivetta from the Boston Red Sox. He's going to be a free agent this winter, and you might hear that name and you might think, okay, wasn't he was kind of supposed to be good in like 2018 or something, right? You look at it just as surface numbers, 4.14 ERA this year, 4.76 career ERA, 2.0 WAR. Doesn't really sound good. Doesn't really get amped, does it? I don't know that Michael Lorenzen got anyone amped. Jack Flaherty definitely did not get people amped when the Tigers signed him. So this is why I think Pivetta could be the Tigers' latest project. Let's take a deeper look. All right. He dominates the strike zone, 6.1% walk rate. That's really good. Strikes out a lot of guys, 28.9% strikeout rate, more than 10 Ks per nine. His walks have decreased. His strikeouts have increased or stayed steady over the years. And then what really gets me, Stuff Plus. For those who don't know, this is basically pitch modeling. This is pretty advanced stuff. The type of things front offices look at. It's putting pitches on a plot, taking context and the random results of baseball out of it, and just saying, how good are these guys' pitches? Like, how nasty is this guy? Among all major league starters last year who threw at least 20 innings, so pretty much any starter that was relevant, Nick Pivetta had the best Stuff Plus of all of them. He added a sweeper 2 years ago, began throwing it a lot more this year, gets swing and miss at a 35% clip. Expected batting average against that sweeper was 196. And you think when the Tigers like a guy, they usually already have a thing in mind. If we do this or this, we can get this guy to be even better. So I have no idea what they might see in his mechanics, but just looking at his pitch mix, he's pretty heavy, fastball, sweeper, curveball. He has a cutter. He hasn't had a ton of success with it, especially not this past year, and still throws a little bit of a traditional slider. So just to me, from afar, seems right. Maybe if you can help this guy improve that cutter a little bit to work between the fastball and the sweeper, that could be an obvious addition. He's a little susceptible to the home run ball, and he gives up a lot of fly balls. Comerica Park going to be a lot better than Fenway Park for that home run rate. And maybe not the best example, but Kenta Maeda was a pretty heavy fly ball pitcher, and the Tigers seem to like him. Remember, the Tigers rank at or near the top of converting fly balls into outs in the outfield. So when I put all that on paper and the fact that Pivetta, although I think every front office is looking at Stuff Plus, so he might have some other suitors, he should be relatively affordable. Man, this seems like a guy the Tigers just might love.
Yeah, and I like how you kind of brought up the Maeda thing because there's going to be a couple parallels that you could draw there. Age probably being one of them. Obviously, he's not Maeda old, but he is going to be in his age 32 season. But that also, in theory, means you're probably not doing. I mean, maybe I don't know. That could be completely wrong. You might not do like the 1 year prove it deal with him. You know what I mean? Like, so it might be a Maeda closer relevant contract than like a Flaherty 1 for 14 to, at the time develop him and make him the asset or whatever. Which again, you really shouldn't be signing anybody this offseason with the idea of trading them at the deadline. Like you want to make yourself flexible, and all that stuff. You got to anticipate things that could happen. I understand that, but like, you know what I mean? So we talked about that. He's a CAA guy. Tigers have, seemingly have had good relationships with bringing in CAA guys. Flaherty, one of them, correct? And so like, all these things play a factor. That's why I bring them up. But just looking at the service level stats, the thing that I like is that more or less since he got to Boston, a respected organization, of course, his numbers are pretty consistent. Like there's like if you're the Harris administration and you're trying to bring in like as much data as you can in order to make like a profile that you think this guy can do this and we can improve that and blah blah blah. Like I feel like they have a lot of data points with as much constants as you could possibly get, and which again, like his ERA has kind of fluctuated to the mid fours and down since he's been in the Boston, and he is pretty durable. If you just look at it, he made 33 starts 2 years ago, 16, I guess, 3 seasons ago, 16, 2 seasons ago, but he appeared in 30 something games. And then this past year he made, as reference keeps double freezing on me, he made 26 starts. So like a pretty durable guy and I would say kind of remarkably consistent. Two things that if you're frustrated with the Casey Mizes of the world, if you were, if you were left longing by Reese Olson once he came back from injury, if you remember the Spencer Turnbull era, Like consistency is an enlightening feature for me as I look at possible Tigers.
That's something worth keeping in mind too, especially when we're talking about someone who's going to be penciled in and kind of probably more the back end of your rotation, where you are gonna have some other like will they, won't they type pitchers. It might be nice to have in theory, more stable presence who can just eat some innings. And then obviously, I think if the Tigers are going to go after this guy, it would be because they think he has serious upside as well.
Yeah, I'll be curious. I'll be curious how Nostradamus you are about this one because just like the Yandy, it's a lot of things. These are not perfect like player situation bring-ins, but you're just trying to check as many boxes as you can within the confines of keeping your ethos as an organization. So we're going to be talking about the
Yeah.
entire offseason.
I think, like I said, yeah, I'm gonna keep thinking. I think there are probably gonna be a couple other names that fit this bill, and just because they're interested in a guy doesn't mean they're gonna get him. I mean, they were interested in Severino last season. It didn't happen. Would they double back and go after him now that he did have a pretty good year and they think they can untap even more? I'm not sure. But this is a name that makes a lot of sense. I think the Tigers are going to like him, and there'll probably some more names we will talk about in the days ahead as well. But I'm not sure any check almost every box the way this guy does.
Yeah, like I said, look forward to seeing if you are right. Okay, let's kind of do all right. This episode is being released on Halloween. I hope everybody is gonna have a fun, safe Halloween, whether that's with your kids, whether you're going to a local watering hole, watching some some sports, some games, some people in your life, whatever you're doing. Hope you're having a nice, safe time. If you're trick or treating, here's some trick or treats for you before it gets dark. All right, so the way I kind of wanted to frame this was trick or treat, right? Is it a trick what we saw last season, or is it a treat? Basically, like, is it for real? So, the figure is pretty easy to follow along. The first one's not easy, though. So I ask you, Cody, trick or treat? The Spencer Torkelson that we saw post call down when he got called back up is closer to the Spencer Torkelson that we can anticipate the development from there on out in 2025. And I'll remind the listeners, in 54 games to start the year, he hit 201. He had 4 home runs, 597 OPS, 16 walks. I bring this up a lot. 38 games is not including postseason. 38 games after being called up, 248, 6 home runs, 781 OPS, and he had 17 walks. Again, 50 games, 54 games to 38 games. We only got not that many games at Special Torkelson this past year. So trick or treat, Special Torkelson has, to coin a phrase we used to say a lot, has gotten closer to turning the corner.
I feel like I'm a broken record here. He has 1,400 plate appearances. So is there still a corner left to turn? I think when I see his numbers after his call up, 781 OPS, I don't necessarily think that's a trick. So I'll give the guy a treat. What I worry is that his ceiling. Again, 2 years ago, he hit 30 homers. Even when he was really good, the total package offensively was just slightly above average. It wasn't phenomenal. He wasn't an elite hitter. He was a guy who hit for some power. And so you look at this, I mean, that drought, he had a pretty lengthy drought in the middle of that, but he also, 6 homers, but he struck out 49 times. Don't love that. Like the average 248, you can feel pretty good about that. 338 OBP. Like if he could do that over the course of a full season, and play improved defense like he did after his call up, he could be a serviceable first baseman without a doubt. So I think he's capable of that. But the more and more we see this guy, I guess the question becomes, okay, we know what the downside is. That's why we're having this conversation right now. Is there still an upside? And it's hard for me to think yes at this point.
The reason I had to start off that way is because if you're the Tigers front office and you think this is a trick, and you kind of have to, like, that's going to be the serving motivation for making a serious move at first base. So if you're a Spencer Torkelson optimist, then you're kind of looking at it as like, all right, well, there's only so much you can fix in season. Focused on this. You saw improvement here, whole off season. Hope to implement more changes. That would be the optimistic look at Spencer Torkelson. Only the Tigers brass and Torkelson know for sure what the deal is there, but obviously a huge offseason for him. All right, another trick or treat. Tarek Skubal, perennial Cy Young guy. Now, not Cy Young winner, but to mention the other pitcher that's pitching tonight, Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole, basically since he was traded to the Astros, was a top 5 finisher in the Cy Young. There's a year in there, I believe, where he was just outside the top 5. More or less, though, he is a top 5 Cy Young guy, and that started at age 27. What is Tarek Skubal? 27, right? So is our trick or treat Tarek Skubal perennial Cy Young candidate here moving forward?
Yeah, I tend to think that's definitely a treat. He has, as we've heard multiple times, like he's kind of become the total package. He has a power fastball. He has one of the best changeups in the game. He has a nasty slider. So he has at least 3 legit pitches. He's got a big frame. He's at least this past year was extremely durable. You know, can improve as a game goes on. Can pump up his velo late in the game. Shows up for the big moments, like diligent worker, focused, driven. Can't think of what more you would want. So the only thing that should keep Tarek Skubal from pitching at this level year in and year out for a long time to come is obviously injury risk, which is up in the air with any pitcher in baseball a little bit. If he stays healthy, I see no reason that we cannot see this level of performance from Skubal for almost a Garrett Cole type run.
I mean, it makes billion organization a lot easier if you can get that out of them. Next one up, speaking of injury, concerns slightly and call up. So combining the previous 2 trick or treats, Parker Meadows. Parker Meadows, you realize he had 300 after he got called up?
That's wild.
And that's
the
not
OPS was crazy, right?
Yeah, and that's, I don't have the OPS in front of me, but I did note that he looking at my notes here. Well, before he got called down, he only had 4 extra base hits. Wow. And that was, I believe, in May. And then when he got called back up, he had 23. So yeah, he was hitting the ball a lot better. And that's not to mention like defense and all that stuff. And yeah, so he was a 300 hitter, post call up. So trick or treat, Parker Meadows is the bat for real.
840 OPS after his call up, and that was in 47 games, so not a tiny sample size. I still think maybe I love Parker Meadows. I think, he should be the Tigers center fielder for as long as his bat will allow, but I think it's probably a little bit of a trick, right? Like, again, we know what the downside is. There's a guy whose performance has kind of fluctuated, or he's been prone to slumps throughout his minor league career. He can still struggle against spin low and in. Like, there's a little bit of a hole in the swing there. I think he's a really talented player, ton of upside. I mean, I don't think he's going to have an 840 OPS next season. I think can he have a 750 OPS? Hell, that would be great. You would take that in a heartbeat. You're still hoping for a league average bat from Meadows, and he's done enough to make you wonder, could there be a little bit more in there? I think over the course of 162, he's not going to perform at quite that level.
I will say that friend of the podcast, Keith Law, kind of hit the nail on the head because he was like, Parker, I'm pretty sure it was Keith. It was either Keith or Jim that was like, if he hits 240, that was like his expectation. And he hit, yeah. I think he ended up technically being 248. Something like that. So yeah,
244. Yeah.
244. So shout outs to Keith and or Jim. Okay, here's one that I think is self-explanatory, but I also want to give it a little bit of credit. Trick or treat, Justin Henry Malloy's 8 hits in 11 plate appearances in the postseason. we'd probably still be talking about him had they at least made the ALCS, because he would have done something, at Yankee Stadium, presumably. You know what I mean? So shout out J-Hen. But trick or treat, J-Hen's postseason tear, a sign of things to come in 2025.
Man, I struggle with Jahan. Like, I just don't quite know what to make of him. I think he had some really impressive at bats, even down the stretch in the regular season. He does some things at the plate that is just really hard not to like. But there's still, I mean, it all comes down to like, what can he do in the field? But then you also zoom out, and he struck out 85 times in 230 plate appearances. Like, he can be pretty strikeout prone. And how much of a factor is that going to be, especially as the league learns him better and pitchers begin attacking him in different ways? I don't know if this one is a trick or treat. This is that candy that you're like handing over to mom and you're like, can you look at this? Can you check this out? Or that more likely like an overly concerned parent is like, no, what is that? That's a little different. Let me look at this. And like, is he, I don't know. He was, what do you say, 8 hits and 11 postseason plate appearances? That's amazing. Is he even on your opening day roster next year? I have no idea, because if you can't trust him to play the field, and if you're not going to let the man try on a first baseman's glove, then it's going to be hard to carry him on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, short, just kind of shallow thinking here. If he could play a decent right field, get a good enough arm, you feel pretty good about a right field platoon of Carey and J-Hen. Like, that's that war at the plate for the right field position would be pretty nice.
Sure.
That would be pretty dang nice. All right, lastly, wrap up. Trick or treat. Going to combine these two guys. Tyler Holton, Matt Vierling, 3 WAR players. Trick or treat for the reliever, the reliever of the year for the team, and utility man. Both kind of utility guys, actually. The pitching and fielding utility players for the team. 3 WAR players for days.
Yeah, another thing that amazes me a little bit is Tyler Holton. Like, he has been so good over the past 2 years, and I am not going to discount that one bit, because he's just been steady. He's been reliable. At the same time, he has sustained an unusually low batting average in balls in play for the better course of 2 years. He's like not supposed to be able to do that, but he has. So logic, statistics would tell me like he's probably not going to be a 3 WAR player. He's also pitched a ton, and he's for the most part like held up and been durable, and his stuff hasn't really dipped much, been very consistent. Can he continue doing that moving forward? I think that's a question. But I don't know. He's also just been so good, so it's hard for me to like land on one verdict or the other. I mean, if I had to choose, I think Holton's going to remain a good reliever for years to come. He's probably not going to be a 3 WAR reliever, because let's face it, that's hard for anyone to do out of the bullpen. Vierling's an interesting one too. Obviously did some good things this year, did get the ball in the air a little bit more, did tap into his pull side power. But I think what impresses me the most about Vierling is just all the little things he always seemed to be doing. Quality at bats when you need one, sack flies, runs the bases well, plays the outfield well. Not great at third, but can hold his own over there. Like, just seemed to do so many little winning things on the baseball field, especially in the final 2 months of the season. Does that equate to another 3 WAR year? A little bit hard to say. Like, is there still more he can tap into at the plate? I don't know. Or could he be prone to go back into that kind of ground ball mode? Given that that's his history, that's what I would worry about. I'd worry that maybe there's not a ton more there in the tank. Maybe he could be a big regression candidate next year. I do hold that fear a little bit, while simultaneously like really respecting the way Matt Vierling plays the game.
Yeah, both guys to me are, it's not a perfect analogy, but sort of like that 6-man in basketball or that slot receiver in football, that it's like you keep the roles correct and we have a lot of effectiveness for you. You start asking them to do things that isn't necessarily a strength, be on the outside, play more minutes type deal. I think you start to see the inadequacies a little bit more. if the Tigers are in the postseason next year, I would heavily prefer Matt Vierling not be the 3-hole hitter. Is the way I would phrase that.
You would hope the lineup is somehow improved to where that's not the case. Yeah.
All right, that was fun. I told you I was going to be a Sugar Rush podcast.
I think that was pretty good. I think that was pretty good stuff for Halloween.
Yeah. So again, hope everybody's will have a safe and happy Halloween. Cody, I hope you find yourself something to do. I know you referenced that last time, so hope you have a fun Thursday night. I want to thank everybody for listening. Thank you for subscribing wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to YouTube. We are growing the YouTube. Make sure you are on YouTube so you can see our pretty faces and be like, oh yeah, that's what they look like. This is what we look like, but we reserve the right to change whenever we want. And also follow us on the socials. Cody's at Cody Stavenhagen. I am at Kieran_Steckley. Pod page at Tiger Territory. Almost slipped the tongue there. This is Tiger Territory, formerly known as Turn the Corner. So for Cody Stavenhagen, I am Kieran Steckley. Everybody have a great holiday.